Is starting a business worth the risk?
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Brian, I am so excited about this because I think a lot of folks, they hear about small businesses and entrepreneurs and starting their own thing and being their own boss, and they think about it as this like really aspirational, super exciting, super high achieving thing that they want to do. But I worry that a lot of people don't realize it's more than just unicorns and rainbows. It's more than just a happy time. There's some other thoughts that need to go into whether or not it makes sense for someone to start a small business.
Yeah, I think let's get into the language of this. Is that I'm such a simple guy. I talk about small business owner. But if you go on and if you've watched enough Bachelor and other things, I always think it's obnoxious when people, their title is entrepreneur. I mean, I feel like out of Jaguar. If you say it, it just sounds so fancy when you say terms like entrepreneur and other things. And it is one of those concepts I feel like is deemed sexy. Mm-hmm. And if you go on social media, there's so many aspirational people out there that are pushing products and other things and saying, you too can be part of this cool club if you'll just do this, if you'll just do that. And so why is being an entrepreneur or a small business owner so sexy to the public?
Well, I think when folks think about it, it's obviously the freedom that it provides, but there is a wealth component to it. This is research from U Wider, and they said that 81% of the wealthiest 1% of folks are entrepreneurs. And here in the United States, entrepreneurs own 33% of U.S. wealth, but only make up about 7.6% of the population. So I think a lot of people arrive at this conclusion that, okay, if I'm going to be an entrepreneur, if I'm going to start a business, then I will be wealthy. It's this natural thing that they assume is sort of this cause and effect relationship. And while sometimes it does work out that way, it's not always that way.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, especially that 30, when you talk about the 33% of U.S. wealth comes from 7.6% of the population. Mm-hmm. When we surveyed our entire client base that came from the Money Guy show, when we do our annual wealth survey, it was right at 8% are
right there
entrepreneurs. So it was kind of interesting to see how much that tied to this research. But this is only part of it. When we see the riches or the wealth that's created, I feel like this is the glossy part of the brochure that so much of financial media has jumped on, and it creates, it's almost like a false mirage of, hey, everybody should do this. Right. And to the point that there are so many blog posts, there are so many articles, so many columns that I just consider vague dribble. Mm-hmm. They don't really tell you if you are aspirational or if you have a talent that you want to uncork and unleash on the world. Why doesn't the content that's being created for this scratch the itch to tell you how to do it versus just make you feel good about what happens if you start this journey?
Yeah, we were doing some pre-show prep around small business and entrepreneurship, and there was this article from Inc., right? And it laid out 15 reasons you should start your own small business today. And I just thought it'd be really interesting to talk about some of these reasons very quickly, Brian. For you, someone who has started a number of small business over the last 20 or 30 years you've been doing this, a number of small businesses, would you say that like these would be the reasons why you said, oh yeah, this is why I started my small business? Number one, was it because you had the time? Oh, I'm just sitting around. I got a lot of extra time. Maybe I should just start a small business. Maybe I should go be an entrepreneur. Was that? Right. Did you do that?
No, it wasn't. I mean, that's good though if you have extra time. I mean, it's definitely necessary.
It shows something. All right, what about this one? You have the money. Oh, here's a reason why you ought to start your own business. You got the money because most small business owners, they got just money laying around before they start the business, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is very vague advice. Mm-hmm. Keep going.
What about number three? You have the courage.
Right.
Well, if you're brave enough to go out on your own, then that's a sign that you should maybe do it. Or number four, you have the right connections. Okay, I know folks, I come from a certain place or a certain area, a certain family, so maybe I should do this. Or what about number five? You're never late to any party. I don't even know what that means. I don't even know why Inc. was considering that to be one of the reasons that someone should start their small business. But if I were reading this article and thinking, okay, I've been thinking about this entrepreneur thing, how do I sort of check the boxes of whether this fits for me? I don't know that this is the advice that I would lay out. I don't know that I would let these reasons be the reasons why I decide to hang a shingle and go out on my own and try something new.
Well, I think you take the vagueness of the advice, you think about the actual stats of how many people are small business owners or entrepreneurs, and it's less than 8%.
Yep.
So that means that 92% of the public is not going to be a small business owner, but yet we have industries, magazines, and so many other things telling you everyone should do this. There's a disconnect. So all I can say is it seems like a lot of this is because you can get rich doing it.
Yep.
And then the question I always come back to, is rich enough to why you should start a small business?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks, they fall into this trap of, okay, I'm going to start this small business and this is going to be the outcome. I'm going to create this world-changing thing or this life-changing thing, and it's going to be unbelievable. But the statistics actually tell quite a different story. 20% of small businesses fail in the first year. 20% of small businesses do not make it past their first year. And after 5 years, 50% of all small businesses fail. And after 10 years, it's 70%.
Yep.
So it's a hard thing. Like once you start a small business, it's not a guarantee that it's going to work. It's not a guarantee that it's going to be successful. And it's not a guarantee that if you're starting it to be wealthy or to be rich, that that's going to be an outcome that you're going to recognize just by simply working through the process.
It's definitely the road less traveled. And look, I will tell you, I think I love it. It has created, I was thinking about how blessed we are driving into the office today, knowing we're going to do this show, on how unique it is. We get to create content. We get to do financial planning, all things that I just feel like we were put on this earth to do. And we get paid to do it. And we get to have employees and grow a firm. It really is one of the most fulfilling and incredible things. But there's so many steps. Everybody always sees the end results, and they don't see all the chaos and all the things that are in between. And I think that's what we wanted to start centering this. We wanted to bring this show into focus so that those of you who actually do have this aspiration, how do you know that you're going to be successful? And we want to give you the tools to actually do this well, not just the fluff that gets you excited and hopped up about how wealthy and rich you're going to be, without telling you really what's going to create success. So we wanted to lay this out for you.
And so let me ask you a question, Brian. So what was it when you started your very first small business back in 2002? What was the story? What was it that caused you to make the jump? Why did you decide to move in that direction?
Yeah, I started my first company when I was in my mid to late 20s, and I call it tragic clarity. Through my life, I'd watched my father be laid off when he was in his mid 40s. I had watched my father get sick and then pass away rather quickly when I was in my 20s. And all that kind of gave me a clarity of life to know, hey, I needed to do things a little differently. But I got to tell you, money was not the driving factor. It was, when I think about it, what I cited as the reasons were completely different than the money. Money was kind of a side effect. I can still remember my conversation with my former boss, and the number I told him was very modest compared to what we've kind of tried to create. So you need to understand what your why is. The money, like I said, is a side effect. I did it more for the flexibility, time with the family, and then the ability to do life on my terms. That was the why. And I felt like I had a talent that I was never going to be able to do within a structure of somebody else's company.
And my story is very different than yours. Obviously, I did not have to go out and start a business on my own, but I did make the decision when I graduated from school to go join a small business, right? And whenever you are in a small business, especially a really small business like we were back then, it's just different than working for a large company or a large corporation. One of the things that I was really excited about was this ability, even as a young person, to have an immediate impact. I think that when you are an entrepreneur, when you're in a small business, you're able to do that. You're able to better control your trajectory or even the trajectory of the enterprise that's moving. So those were some of the reasons why I decided, hey, I'm going to try to work in a small business, work with a small business owner, because I wanted that sort of trajectory. I wanted that sort of opportunity. It was not because of the money. It was not because I thought, oh, well, this is my way to be rich, because frankly, a lot of times when you go take a job with a small business or when you begin as a small business owner, you're going to make less. You're going to have less income opportunities than you did when you were just working for a large corporation or had you taken a different job. So that was what was unique to me. So I think that being wealthy or being rich is sort of a side effect, but it was never the reason. It was never the purpose. It was never the driving factor of why to do it.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship is exactly what you described. You think about all the startups and stuff, you're right. Maybe you don't make as much initially because big corporations can offer large salaries, but they cap the top end of your opportunity. Whereas startups and smaller companies, there's a lot of blue water for you to swim in to be a part of the growth, success, the hockey stick, and you get rewarded for that. But it's back to really family, community, freedom. Income was a side effect when I think back to the process. So make sure you understand that. So that leads to, that's probably a great transition point to start. Let's start putting the layers together of should you start a small business?
Yeah, and so I think, again, remember that 50% or 20% of small businesses fail in the first year. After 5 years, it's 50%, and after 10 years, it's 70%. So one of the things that you really want to think about before you do this, before you jump into this is this right for me? And I think one of the ways that we always figure out is something right for me or does this make the most sense is understanding what are the obstacles, what are the things that I'm going to face, what are the difficulties. And so there was a great piece from business.com, and it said these were the most commonly cited challenges to starting a business, to small business owners. And I'm curious, again, because you've done this a number of times, I want to see if you say, okay, yes, this does resonate, or no, this completely misses the mark. Number one, running the show alone. So we hear a lot of times, I want to start a small business because I get to be the boss and I get to control my time and I get to control what I do and I get to control my trajectory. But one of the things that you don't recognize is the buck stops with you, right? Like you are the guy calling the shots, and there might not be anybody else around to help you with that.
You definitely want to be a decisive person if you're doing this alone, because it do a lot of things by committee. If you think about even your HOA, you think back to all the committees. If you're a PTO member at school, it's very rare that you do things all by yourself. And sometimes with entrepreneurship, it is kind of what the normal is. What's interesting to me, though, is I had issues with clients or prospects having issues with me being the only one running the show too. Yeah. So that's something that comes in. That leads to number two, which is finding the funding. Because, now look, the article said finding funding, and it sounds like everybody's starting, the next Uber or Upstart and got a venture capital fund funding you. No, that for a lot of people, finding funding is the savings you had before you started the company, plus your ability to go get new clients or customers. It's tough. It's not easy.
That's probably the hardest part of starting a business is actually coming up with an idea that other people want to buy and then going out and actually finding those people. It's not a given that if you build it, they will come. It doesn't always work that way. Now, one of the other big challenges that this article cited, it said getting health insurance. I'm going to expand that a little bit. There are certain benefits that come with working in a large corporation or working with an organization. Again, when you're on your own, when you start a small business, you got to figure out that kind of stuff. You got to figure out health insurance and benefits and how are you going to do the things for your family that previously were taken care of by an employer. When you start a small business, it's all on you now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that this is definitely a logistics thing as you have a growing family. Health insurance, just like an early retiree, it's something a lot of us, when we work for larger corporations, take for granted. Yep. It's definitely when you go the road less traveled, it's no longer a given. You now have to try to figure this out.
What about this next one? This is a big challenge to business starters. Getting, and then I love in parentheses, and staying organized and on track. Now, back many, many years ago, when you were a solo practitioner, right? It was just you, and maybe you had some administrative help. Would you cite this as being a really difficult thing to not only stay organized, but to continue to stay focused on what you were ultimately trying to accomplish?
Yeah, and we're going to spend some time on this a little bit later in the show, but it is one of those things where you have so many things coming at you at once when you start a business, and the fact that you're trying to get business, but then you also are trying to build the train tracks for taking your business to the next place. And it's hard because if so much of your effort is going out there towards business development and you're also trying to build a system that's not just you, this is hard because, and we're going to cover this, you don't want to get busy, wasting time. Don't get busy doing nothing, essentially, where you're not actually focusing on things that will add value to your business. But it's also one of those things what comes first? Do you go get the business? Do you organize the business? How do you do all this?
Sure.
And there's no manual that's exactly built the same way for any business.
And then what about this fifth challenge? Again, one of the fifth challenge they cited was maintaining a healthy work-life balance. So when you're the boss, right, when you start a small business, it's not really anymore clocking in and clocking out. You're kind of always on. You're always the business owner. You're always the person who's having to drive the ship. Did you say that you struggle with that, and did it change throughout your entrepreneurial journeys?
This was probably the biggest shock and awe factor of being a small business owner, is that I did small business ownership so I would have good work-life balance. Because like I said, I had that tragic clarity of losing my father early. Wanted to be able to go to the kids' awards ceremonies, baseball games, softball, whatever was going on. So I started a company with the decision to have this maximum flexibility. But the reality is, in that first 10,000 hours period, that first 5 years of the business, you don't have work-life balance. You will do work
Yep.
because you have to get this thing out of the ditch. You have to fund it. You have to get the spaceship fired up. And so it's not healthy in the beginning. I'll just go ahead and tell you, because then it also bleeds into the fact that you're trying not to look like this thing's going into the ditch to your loved ones. So you tend to lose sleep too.
Sure.
So you're grumpy. And I love it. I'm telling you, I love it, but I just want people to be clear. The first 3 to 5 years will be tough on this journey. So don't go into it too rosy and not create a plan for that.
So I think one of the things that you have to answer is, if you are thinking about entrepreneurship or you are thinking about a small business, you ought to think about walking through each one of these challenges and figuring out, do I have an answer for this? If I'm concerned about running the show alone, do I have a mentor? Do I have someone else who's done this successfully that I can lean on? If I'm worried about either finding funding or finding the clients, do I think there are actually people that are out there that can help me solve this? And I would actually work through each one of these 5 things to make sure you understand the counterpart, because you would prefer to have this figured out before you launch than to launch and be sitting there saying, oh man, I didn't think about this, or oh, I didn't realize this would be an issue. So then the next question that you have to walk through is, all right, okay, I've thought about this. How do I know if I have the chops, right? Like, how do I know if I can actually do it?
This is the part that gets me excited, because we came up with 3 things you need to focus on to get the journey right. This really is experience share time, where we're now going to tell you the 3 components you can control that will actually help you build that successful small business. And the first one is, and this is foundational, is your mind right? And guys, I want to expand on this, because this is one of those things where, like I said, there's entire industries that are preying upon the aspirational small business owners, entrepreneurs, and the fact that they make you feel good. They tell you all the awesomeness of it. But the first thing you have to do is make sure your mind's right. Are you willing to do what others are not willing to do? Remember, 92% of the public, this ain't for them. So you have to first make sure, are you willing to do the work that others aren't? Remember what I was talking about earlier? 10,000 hours or 5 years of your life will probably be devoted to this. It's going to disrupt a lot of your personal life-work balance. It's not healthy in the beginning. So make sure you have your mind right, that you'll do the work that others aren't willing to do. Are you willing to do the unsexy side of business? We all see the Instagram and the Twitter, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into organizing a business too.
Yeah, I think one of the, a lot of folks, their first foray into small business, and this is sort of like little microcosms, like real estate. Like, I want to be a real estate person. That's great. And you think about, oh, I'm going to get the tenants, I'm going to get this mailbox money, and the thing is going to pay for itself. Have you thought about what happens when, like, there's a noise in the crawl space and you got to be the one to crawl down in there, or 2 o'clock in the morning when the phone rings because the hot water heater is leaking or the air conditioning or heat went out? Have you thought about, with your small business, whether it's customer complaints or returns or regulations or government or whatever the thing is, have you thought about all the things that aren't the fun parts of the business? Everyone wants to think, oh, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to create an idea, I'm going to sell a thing, and it's going to impact the person on the other end of that. That's the fun part, but that's not 100% of what small business is. So you have to make sure that, again, from a mindset standpoint, you're not only thinking about the positives, you're not only thinking about the rosy stuff, but you've put serious time in considering the downsides of entrepreneurship, the downsides of small business ownership.
Yeah, I mean, the Instagram and all the social media posts is where the sizzle and the sexy is, but The success is actually sitting in the kitchen with the accounting and all the organizational stuff that we'll get into in a minute. I think more folks are more in love with the idea of being an entrepreneur than the actual work of being an entrepreneur. And that's the part you want to make sure you figure out. Are you the real deal, or are you just a wannabe?
Now, this is maybe unkind, but I do this thing sometimes. I have a lot of buddies that are dreamers, and they come up with all these great ideas of all this stuff. And I'm like, hey, awesome, I love that. And then I start kind of asking them some questions, just sort of walking through, well, how are you going to do this? Well, have you thought about this? Well, have you done this? And I'm always amazed for them to be like, oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. No, you're missing it. You don't get it. I'm like, no, I get it. You don't understand. I think that you have to recognize, it's just what you said. More people like the idea of it than the action of it. So before you decide to jump into that, figure out which side of that line are you on.
So we've got mental preparation, asking yourself the right questions. The next one, this is very important. Is your money right?
Yep.
I mean, because, guys, I think the majority, you heard the stat, and I'm going to repeat it because it's worth repeating. First year, 20% go kaput. You fast forward, and what is it? In the first 5 years, 50% are gone. 10 years, 70% are completely no longer there. It shows me passion ain't getting it done. Talent ain't getting it done. You've got to have more to it. And usually what I've experienced from working in public accounting as well as helping small business owners set up and structure successful businesses, you have to have the passion, you have to have the talent, and you better make sure you got your financial money household in order too. And this is the part that gets overlooked is that, look, if you don't have 3 years, a plan that covers the first 3 years out of the chute, you're in trouble. And that's what I did. I mean, I saved for it. You know, I had the idea of starting my business, and then I proceeded to save for 15 months. And we lived off of one person's income while my wife was still working, and we stockpiled all that money just so I could shelter my family from how poor we were, all the psychological impact of not having money. You need to have cash to get you through that 3-year period while you're building the business.
Now, it's really interesting you say that, Brian, because you talk about you had this like very severe and tragic life event of losing your father that kind of caused you to move in this direction. But this is what it didn't do. And I think a lot of folks, we think when it comes to starting a small business, entrepreneurship, it's like this Jerry Maguire moment. We write the manifesto and we walk in the office and we just decide one day that we're going to walk out and leave. That was not your experience. To make the jump, to leave, it actually took planning and preparation and saving. And I got to believe, because you said when you started your business, you were in your mid to late 20s, right? Yeah. I got to believe there were things that you were married at the time, right? Yeah. That you and your wife probably wanted to do. Trips you wanted to go on, vacations you wanted to take, things that you wanted to do. I imagine one of the things you had to say is, hey, if I really want to be serious about doing this, there are some things I'm going to have to not do right now. There are some sacrifices I'm going to have to make so that we can do that. It takes sacrifice before you even get to the point where you can start sacrificing for a small business. Would you agree with that assessment?
There's sacrifice, there's the savings, and then there's also just preparation. I mean, Bo, I wrote in the notes, QuickBooks.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's like, yeah, I'll just go buy QuickBooks. I'll rent, I'll do the subscription model. I'll do QuickBooks online. It'll be great. Do you know how to use it? Yep. I mean, that's the thing. Nobody ever thinks about that when they're building this better mousetrap or this small business. And that leads to, and this is a powerful thing. You came up with this one, Bo, and I thought it was great. Are the measurements right?
Yeah, like when you think about small business, have you done what I call the Brian Preston 3-prong approach to business plans, right? Have you come up with your scenario analysis that, okay, this is what I think is going to be the most likely outcome? And that's a fun one to think about. If you didn't think it would be successful, you probably would not be going out on your own. Have you thought about, okay, this is what I think it will most likely look like? And then I think it's okay to think about, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I don't realize that I have this amazing idea? What if I don't realize that I have this hugely inventive thing that's going to change the world? And it's okay to think along those lines. But the third one, and I think the one that's most often missed when someone does a business plan, is they don't think about the broke scenario. Yeah. What happens if I miscalculate? What happens if I'm wrong? What happens if I thought I was going to start my business and make $100,000 a year? What if I never make more than $30,000 a year doing this business? What does that look like? And how long has my preparation afforded me to be able to do that? And have I really thought through realistically how all three of those scenarios might play out in my situation?
So just to kind of pile on to what Bo's saying, I think every great big life decision ought to have those 3 scenarios. Do it. I'm talking about pen and paper. I'm talking about a spreadsheet. You actually create a business plan with 3 scenarios. What I think is going to happen, oh man, I'm going to be rich. Everybody loves doing that one. And then the one that nobody wants to talk about, but it's very important. It's just like you do fire drills, just like when you go on a cruise, you're doing all these muster drills. You want to know what happens if this thing doesn't work. You need to do I'm going to be broke scenario so that you can plan ahead and you're not caught flat-footed. Nobody ever does that. I think most people, like I said, are very aspirational with the goals and they just jump without doing the actual bridge building or making sure that you land well no matter what scenario comes your way.
I think if you're out there, again, thinking about, okay, I want to start a small business or I want to go into entrepreneurship, I think it would be an amazing idea, an amazing thing to do, to take those 5 sort of headwinds that we laid out and write them out and write out how you'll address each one of those. And then take these 3 ideas right now. Is my mind right? Is my money right? Are my measurements right? And figure out, can you clearly and concisely answer all 3 of those questions? And if you thought through, sort of in a T-chart sort of way, the pros and cons to each one. What are the good sides of this? What are the bad sides? How long will the money last? What happens when the money runs out? How good could this be? How bad could it be? If you actually spend the time working through that exercise, you might be amazed at one of 2 things. Either you talk yourself out of it and say, okay, maybe I wasn't ready for this. Maybe this was, or you may feel even more on fire, more encouraged, more in the belief that you can actually go do this and be successful. I think that'd be a great way to start a business plan if you are thinking about taking the lead.
Yeah, and it was as we transitioned to I have even more planning tips. I do feel like as I'm hearing us talk about, I'm like, man, we sound a little bit like Debbie Downers on this whole concept of business ownership. Well, I mean, but I want to make sure, but I feel like we're your tour guides. You're going on a hike where every other part of your life, it's kind of like also the transition. I'm giving lots of analogies here of high school to college. When you're a student, in high school, they spoon feed you a chapter a week. You get to college, you're doing 3 chapters a day, 2 to 3 times a week. And you're like, whoa, I need the preparation to make sure, because I'm worried this is something where you are walking the tightrope without the net, and the fact that you get to the sign that says, hey, before you enter this trailhead, realize there's not going to be any other life. There's not going to be any other, places to get additional supplies for the next 100 miles. You're going to treat that a lot differently than you would on something that says, hey, if you can do this for 5 minutes, you'll be okay. Because that's the way entrepreneurship is. It is a hike for 100 miles without any post or respite areas that are going to protect you. And I'm just trying to make sure that I'm a good tour guide, not getting you all hopped up on how great it's going to be to go to hike the Appalachian Trail without telling you there are going to be tracks where you don't have any type of respite, so you better go ahead and plan ahead. That's what we're trying to do here. So I kind of wanted to transition now to, it ties into this. What are those pitfalls? What are the obstacles that as a good trail guide we can make sure that you don't fall into? Because we have experience. This is not aspirational stuff. We've actually walked on these trails. We've done the journey. If you will do what we tell you to do, you will be successful.
Now, I want to give you a lot of credit here, Brian, because we were talking in show prep about what are some of the pitfalls to watch out for. And we were all thinking kind of like high level, big ideas. And you were like, no, guys, you're 10 steps ahead. You forgot about the first step. And the first step is that operations matter when it comes to small business. Small business is more than just the small business.
This is something, everybody, you're a workout guy. I'm not. I work out because I'm just trying not to die. But one of the adages you see on working out is don't skip leg day.
Yep.
Because you see pictures of people all the time where they'll have big old biceps, big old broad chest, but then you look at their legs, they're always wearing pants. And you're like, why are they always wearing pants? It's because when you see them, they got little chicken legs.
Bird legs,
Because they skipped leg day. And I feel like small business owners, in a lot of ways, the stuff you see on social media is the biceps and the bench press.
Yep.
I mean, it is all the sexiness, and everybody's skipping leg days. And when I'm talking about leg days, don't skipping leg days, is those operations. And let's go through some of this. First of all, before we get into taxes, there's business structure.
Yep.
Like, are you going to be an LLC? Are you going to be an S corporation? Are you going to be a C corporation? You know,
Sole
all
proprietor.
these things. Are you going to be a sole proprietor? How is there a transition? You will start one, will turn into something else as we have more success. All this needs to be taken into account. And then we transition into, and think about this, and I come from an accounting background, and I tell people all the time, if they go to college and they don't know what in the world they want to study, I'm like, go into accounting.
Yep.
Because accounting is the building blocks of all businesses. I don't care if they make cookies. I don't care if it's a restaurant. I don't care if they're financial planners. I don't care if they're attorneys. I don't care if it's Intel or what, Home Depot. They all are running profit and loss income statements. They're also all running cash flow statements. They're all running balance sheets. The place you learn how to do financial statements is when you study accounting and bookkeeping, and nobody wants to do that. And that's why everybody goes in business with us.
That's what I was going to say. What I think is amazing is I've been around you long enough, Brian, and you know, people come to us all the time asking about investing in businesses and stuff, and people always get so excited when they think that, oh, maybe I can get Brian to go into business with me because I know he's going to be the bookkeeper. I know that he's going to be the guy that's doing the stuff I don't know, that I did not know about. If you ever want to pick a really good business partner, it's not a bad idea to pick an accountant to be that business partner because they are well-versed in those types of areas.
Go look at how many Fortune 500 executives come from an accounting backgrounds. And here's why, and Daniel humored me on this. Bo hated this slide, by the way, because it's chaotic. And if you don't know, Bo is kind of an OCD, orderly type person. Daniel humored me because I wanted this to come at you, and Daniel gets me. I mean, me and Daniel, we're spirit animals, and the fact that, look at this. If you think about it, you got federal taxes.
Yep.
Okay, that's the big one. Everybody at least thinks about federal taxes. You think about business licenses.
Yep.
Who's thinking about that, by the way? When you go get a loan to buy a building or something, they're going to ask you, hey, do you have a business license? Secretary of State annual filing. This is one, sneaks up on everybody. Payroll taxes, because payroll taxes, that sounds very simple. Well, of course, I'm running realize payroll taxes comes in many different forms. So you've got Social Security, you've got Medicare, you've got unemployment taxes, you've got workers' comp, all these things. And then, by the way, workers' comp is not even a payroll tax. It just comes out while you're doing your payroll taxes. It's all complicated. Sales and use taxes. This is one, people start these virtual businesses and they don't even realize, hey, if I'm selling a product, state probably wants to know about it. So you've got sales taxes. You live in a state like Tennessee, and you're like, hey, I live in this is a great state. They don't have an income tax here. And then you find out, oh no, they do have taxes. It's called franchise and excise tax. These are privilege taxes for having your company in their state and doing it. Do you think the average person goes because they're passionate about whatever it is? Like I said, whether it's making cookies, whether it is starting your own law firm, I don't care what it is. You will have to go through this gauntlet of regulations and understanding. Make sure you do the preparation on this because you don't want to start having some success, start having some traction, and then find out, oopsie, I didn't do any of the things I was supposed to, and now I have the government. I'm in business with the government because they're collecting penalties, interest, and as well as the additional taxes that I failed to pay earlier in the business process.
Now, when we were doing our show prep, Brian, I was like, you're right. I said, this is an ugly slide. This is dumb. Why are we going this in depth? This stuff, it doesn't make any sense. It seems scattered. It's all over the place. And you said exactly. Exactly. Because when you are a small business owner, you're thinking about usually one thing, and that's your business. And then all of a sudden, an IRS letter shows up, or a Department of Labor letter shows up, or a Secretary of State letter shows up. And just like these terms come flying at you when you're a small business owner, that kind of stuff happens. So if you're not prepared, if you're not thinking through this, you're ignoring a big part of what will be necessary for you to even be able to operate your business. So I'm going to give you credit and say you were 100% right on this one, but I still hate the slide. It drives me nuts, and I think it's all discombobulated and out of order.
So this is leg day, so operations is important, bookkeeping is important. Make sure you're not neglecting that part of your business. But this second part is another transition point that I think small businesses struggle with. I struggled. I will personally tell you, this was a struggle for me. Was when do you know that you should hire somebody?
Yeah, when it comes to hiring, and we have counseled clients on this, we counsel other business owners, and we've learned this by doing it wrong a lot. We've learned that Goldilocks is your friend when it comes to small business ownership because you don't want to hire too early and you don't want to hire too late. You want to hire just the right amount of people at just the right time. I'm amazed, again, when I have my dreamer buddies who they come up with this great idea, like, hey, guys, I'm gonna oh, I've got this idea for an app and it's going to be incredible. And I'm like, awesome, dude. You're a soccer coach. You don't know how to code. What are you gonna, oh, I'm just going to hire a programmer. I was like, oh, okay, cool. You're going to pay a programmer. Where's that money going to come from? And it's just, they've already hired 10 employees before they've made the first dollar of revenue. And then there's the other folks that are so afraid and so scared of entrepreneurship that say, oh man, I can't take on that expense. Yeah, I know I'm working 100 hours a week right now, but man, if I take that on, it's not going to be. The right answer is probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and that's what you laid out a ton there, and I think there's a lot that I can reflect on. Is that I was that former, which was so scared, so tight with the money, because I just knew how hard it was to make it, that I was scared to hire anybody because I was like, well, what if this doesn't pay for itself? Because realize when you make any hiring decisions, it will, from a profit standpoint, you will in the short term go negative. You are going to take away a portion of what you've already created in the business. This is what I always think our legislative body, our government body doesn't understand about small business ownership is that when we hire folks, we actually take ourselves backwards.
Yep.
So hopefully we can take 3 steps forward later, but it's not instant. It's actually got quite a lag on it. So I think all small business owners have that fear. Plus there's the component that when I take on an employee, this person's fate and future falls on my shoulders a little bit too. It is a heavier thing than you've ever thought of when you're doing something that's already a risky endeavor based upon the stats we've already given. So I was scared. 2002 is when I started my first company. I didn't have my first salaried employee. I did have like hourly people that were Miss Priscilla and others, but Bo, you were my first salaried employee where I was offering benefits and other things. That was 2008. So 6 years.
And you were terrified of that.
Yeah, I was terrified. Now it's crazy to me because we will hire 5 at once, and it seems completely reasonable to do that multiple times during the year. And that's the part that I think you nailed it, and you said, I want you to be scared. It is like riding a motorcycle or working a knife. You should be scared of that tool because it can be dangerous if not used appropriately. So make sure you are measuring twice, cutting once on the hiring decision. I would give you the guidance of the Goldilocks for me is, as you start having success, be a little ahead of where you are on building this machine because you don't want to wait until you're completely in need of an additional person. Because like I said, there's a lag, not only in you recouping the revenue, but also in them having the talent and the tools to where they're successful in actually adding value. So you've got to layer that and have a little bit of field vision to plan ahead so that they're actually successful in your business.
Another pitfall that we think you ought to watch out for when it comes to small business is that money management, and when we say money management, we are talking about literally budgeting and debt, matter. So too does time management. And I want to kind of start with money management a little bit because I'm always amazed at small business owners who just have no concept of this, right? So I was having a conversation the other day with a small business owner, and she was telling me about what her gross revenues were. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Her business has been operating for a couple of years, and it was in the 6 figures, and it was great. I was like, that's wonderful that your business is doing well. How much do you make? Like, what do you do? And she's like, oh, and she was like dumbfounded. She's like, oh, well, if I need some, I just spend this here and I'll just, I'll pull money out and spend this there. And it kind of blew my mind. She could not give me, like you talk about QuickBooks, she could not walk me through, okay, here's my top line and this is where my expenses fall and this is what my personal take is. And she was lost. And I told her, I was like, you realize to understand whether your business is working or not working or whether it will continue to work in the future, you need to have a bead on those metrics. You need to understand, just like with your personal finances, when you first start out, odds are you had to put together a budget. Hey, this is how much I'm going to have going here, and this is how much here, and this is how much here. Starting a business is no different. You ought to understand exactly where your dollars are flowing because it's real easy when you're the boss and the money comes into the cash register. You need money, you just take it out of the cash register. That's a dangerous place to get into because it will cause you to get lazy and careless when it comes to making your business spending decisions.
I think that a lot of business owners, you hear about it, and this is an important tool, but I'm going to tell you where there's a fallacy in this too. Delegate as much as possible, and people will go hire, you'll hire a bookkeeper, you'll hire people who are doing all the things that you don't want to, and that's a good thing in practice if done effectively. But realize nobody's going to love your business like you love your business. Right. So part of your responsibility with loving your business is you better know your numbers. I mean, I am shocked at how many people will tell me, and look, we have built this bad thing, and the fact that I think about some of the entrepreneur organizations we're a member of, they will have a revenue goal. You can't even apply for membership unless you have revenue of like $1 million a year. So what do small business owners want to do? They want to get to $1 million of revenue as fast as possible. That's not the metric to look at, guys. Profit, exactly what Bo was talking about. Profit, after you take in what you're going to get through revenue, take all your expenses out, what's actually left for you, the person that took the risk and is growing this for your family and the legacy and other things, what is left? Because I have so many experience shares. Like I can think about a manufacturing company that I used to work with. The owner wanted to get his revenue up to $10 million as fast as possible, but I blew his mind when I did a comparison of prior years because he reached the $10 million. And I said, you realize 3 years ago you actually made more money.
Made more money on less revenue.
What? He was like, I'm twice as big as I was revenue-wise now. I'm like, you're taking a lot of projects that aren't profitable. You're just trying to get that top-line number so high that nobody's paying attention to actually how much you get to keep. And that's a problem with, you've got to have the budgeting, you've got to have the money management, you've got to know your numbers well enough that you're not taking on unprofitable jobs, you're not taking on employees before you need to, because I think a lot of us, and by the way, we've done some TikTok reaction videos, and everybody thinks when you start a business, everything's deductible. So, well, you know what? If everything's deductible, I can go spend at ease because a portion of this is going to be paid through tax savings by the government. That sounds great in theory, but in reality, you might be waking up this spending beast that's actually taking away from what you can have for your family. And ultimately, that's why you take these type of risks, is that you are trying to build for freedom of time, freedom to do life like you want with your family and the community, but it's also so that you can ultimately start building some profit as well.
Yeah, and I think we'd be remiss if we did not say this. I am so often saddened when I see a small business that has the perception of being really, really good, meaning they have a high revenue number and they have a good product. And then they ask me to come in and kind of take a look at what they have going on and look at their books. And I see that they're just riddled with debt. They have lines of credit. They have credit card debt they're holding in the business. It is no different than with your personal finances. Debt is not something that you should use cavalierly. It should be treated like a chainsaw. And if you're a business owner and you just have that revolving line of credit because the bank said they would extend it to you and you're just using it willy-nilly, you do not have yourself in a healthy position if you don't have a strategy for what you're doing with that debt and how you're handling it. And we've seen it too many times where it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And these companies implode because they just can't service that debt anymore. So make sure you're keeping an eye on the dollars coming in, dollars going out, to know that you have a healthy and functioning small business.
And then I want to kind of close out this part of the show with the most important, valuable resource, which is your time.
Yep.
Guys, look, I'm going to self-reflect and be very... I'll just tell you where I screwed things up initially. Time is your most valuable resource. I mean, literally, all of you know, whether you're a small business owner, whether you're an investor, you know, the earlier you start saving and investing, that time will benefit you in the fact that it allows exponential growth. But we also know time is what is probably causing you to want to do this, because you're hoping down the road you get to have the freedom to do things on your terms. But there is a risk with how you use your time when you're an entrepreneur, because you no longer have accountability of a boss. Your boss is yourself and the success of your company. And a lot of people aren't using this resource of time well. And I'll tell you, here's where I was. When I started my company originally in 2002, remember, I come from a public accounting background, so I had the operation stuff down. It was in my back pocket. I had that part figured out. So I spent a lot of time doing what I knew I was good at, which was the books of the company. I had the cleanest books you've ever seen. But the part that I wasn't so sure of and I was scared of was actually going out there and making myself uncomfortable of going and meeting with prospects, trying to network, trying to figure out how I could grow my business, because that was rejection. Look, I never liked dating because I'm horrible at this whole game of rejection. And so you can imagine getting new business and business development is just more rejection upon rejection. So I found myself doing a lot of time getting busy doing nothing, of doing what I was already good at, but not really adding any value to the operation. So I'm telling you guys, look at your time. If you're going on this journey of an entrepreneur, a small business owner, look at how you spend your day. Are you doing enough of the uncomfortable stuff that actually going to put your company at the place it needs to be? Because too many of us, we cop out on that. That's the uncomfortable. That's the part that we don't like. And that's where the failure also lies. So go make yourself uncomfortable every day. Mandate it. Schedule it so that you're actually successful, because time is a very valuable resource.
And then I think, again, you also have to think about it on the other end as well. So there are those folks that get busy doing nothing. And then I think there are those entrepreneurs that don't ever take the time to slow down. They get so caught up in the business and what's going on and the work and the next project and the next initiative and the next fill in the blank. And they forget to kind of stop and realize, oh, hey, the whole reason I did this was so that I would have freedom to spend time with family, or so that I could control my hours, or whatever that is. Don't lose track of when your workday starts and when your workday stops. So a great thing you can do is figure out how to put mechanisms in place to protect you from either side. If you are a small business owner and you have other friends that are small business owners, help keep each other accountable. Hey, I know you said that last month you're going to work on this thing. Have you done it? Oh, why not? Oh, you just got caught up doing a project at the house? Well, maybe you should spend some time on this. Make sure you're revisiting with your family. Hey, what's the reason we started the small business? So that we could go on trips? You probably ought to book that trip. You probably ought to take that time. You probably ought to do that thing. Put mechanisms in your place to keep you between those two guardrails. You'll be amazed at how fulfilling entrepreneurship and small business can be.
I'm going to go off script here a little bit, Bo, because you said something just then that hit me. I do think that as you guys start having some success, finding a cohort of, or a forum or a mastermind group of fellow business owners is going to be tremendously valuable too. You have a group, I have a group, because I think there's something like, look, a lot of your friends the 92% that work in normal businesses, they're not going to know your journey. Your spouses, potentially aren't going to be as excited about some of the things you're facing as you are. It's good to have a team building or somebody you can run ideas off of. So don't neglect that part of it as well. I think that's something, we didn't have it in the show notes, but I think that it's crazy for you and I to use this as a resource and not also share that publicly as well.
So one thing, and we were talking about this in show prep too, Brian, you said we came off a little hard and sound a little downtrodden on small businessship and entrepreneurship, but it's because we want you to go into it with eyes wide open. However, there is the positive side of it. There are the success stories. I know that's something that's especially meaningful to you.
It is the greatest thing if you come out on the other side of the road less traveled. And we had Daniel, by the way, we spent more of the content meeting trying to get the right picture for the road less traveled, because I do think that this is something everybody should pay attention to, is because, man, it is fulfilling. I think about one of my childhood best friends. His dad was just a welder, making $7 an hour, got laid off, and then started his own metal fabrication business. And I remember, because he started having some success probably about time, because I was in college, and then even after college, as we worked together for a period of time. And I'd ask him about his journey, and you could see it's that kind of that goosebumps on your arm, glazed over look in their eyes, where you can see that they're reflecting on it's fulfillment is what it is. That's the word, is fulfillment of going the road less traveled. And I think back to the nurses that started that hospice at the ground floor. Man, I should have asked them just for some shares of stock instead of just, helping them navigate, because God bless them. They've done great. And then I think about me and you, Bo. I mean, I actually, I didn't plan this, but I came in this morning.
I was wondering if you could bring it up.
But I closed the door
here.
because I think back, because some people, we moved from Georgia to Tennessee with our business. And I talked to, and I'm still blessed that I'm friends with all those people back in Georgia that, whether it was people who couldn't move up here with us, or business partners that we worked with down there that were service providers. And we're just blessed. I mean, if you do this well, you will be ruined. You will be completely ruined to ever being an employee, because it is a fulfilling path. If you do it right, do the hard work, go the road less traveled. And that's why I would encourage you, leave us below if you've done this yourself. Give us some comments, because this stuff energizes me. And I want us to help the aspirational people out in a positive way. It's not a pep rally. Hey, we want to be rich? Go start a small business. That's not getting the job done. You've got to lay out, what are the tools? What are the tricks? What are the pitfalls? Exactly like we did. Share it with us, because we want this to be a collaborative effort. That's the whole purpose of the abundance cycle, is learn, apply, grow to reach your level of success. That's why we give away tons of the steps on investing with your next dollar, the financial order of operations. By the way, if you haven't checked out, if you go to learn.moneyguy.com, you can find out about the financial order of operations, and we'll tell you exactly what to do with your next dollar. This is what we're doing, and this is why we give it away, so you can be successful.
Make sure you go check out our websites. Go to moneyguy.com. If you look at the resource page, we have tons of free resources, not just the free financial order operations deliverable. We have the money multiplier, how powerful are your dollars. We have the tax guide cheat sheet, when to know how to refinance. If there are financial questions you have, there's a very good chance that we have an answer, a solution, and a tool for you on our website. So make sure you go check that out.
I'm your host, Brian Preston. Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.